My next guest was former US Deputy Assistant Secretary of the Interior and now a senior fellow at the Claremont Institute, Jeremy Carr. Let's start with those explosive revelations in the Wall Street Journal. The US Energy Department concluding that COVID most likely arose from a lab leak. President Trump, he was right all along, but he was absolutely attacked. What do you make of this development?
Well, I think the most serious thing is not even, I think maybe in 2022, it's obviously or 2023, it's very important to know, whether this is in fact true. But the real scandal was that in 2020, you had really intelligent folks like Senator Tom Cotton asking very smart questions about what was going on here, saying, could this be a lab leak? I'm not saying it is. In fact, he even tweeted at the time in February of 2020, probably it's natural origin. And the people who put these things up, like President Trump, like Senator Cotton, like a number of us on the right, were attacked in hysterical terms. And it just showed the first of many, many failures of the global public health establishment and the U.S. public health establishment in particular to just have even the most basic types of honesty and integrity.
Well, is there going to be any sort of reckoning for those people, those organisations? Is there going to be accountability for their efforts, not just to not explore this as a likely scenario, but to attack those who even suggested it?
Well, in an informal way, we've already had the worst of those reckonings, Rita, in that what's happened is a huge breakdown in trust for the vast majority of Americans, particularly on the right, but not exclusively there, in what our public health establishment says. And trust trust is the coin of the realm everywhere, as my old boss, former Secretary of State Schultz, liked to say, but it's really the coin of the realm in public health. It's all about being able to trust those people. And that's been broken. It's not coming back. Now, whether they face the sorts of legal ramifications that they should, I think it's going to depend a lot on the 2024 election. I am pretty optimistic that under a President Trump or a President DeSantis, that some of these folks may, in fact, finally be held accountable. But I think almost no matter what it is, we're not going to see the level of accountability and what really should be prison terms for a few people, particularly like the EcoHealth people. I think they're even though they will hopefully be held at least somewhat accountable, it's not going to be to the degree that they really need to be.
Well, yeah, there doesn't seem to be much of an appetite for forgive and forget from many who had their lives destroyed, had their livelihoods destroyed, had their children kept at home, not allowed to even go to school. And there has been this push for an amnesty, it's been called. Well, let's just all get together and admit we made mistakes and go forward. But there's not the appetite for an amnesty, is there? People want accountability. They want those who inflicted this to pay a price.
Well, I think that's exactly right, Rita. But I think the issue is so much of the establishment is implicated in this to varying greater or lesser degrees that it's just going to be very hard to get that type of accountability. It's sort of it's a brotherhood of thieves, if you will, and none of them are going to really turn on each other, or at least if they do, it's going to take some real doing on our part to make that happen. And so there's this tremendous grassroots effort, anger out there that you touched on. But actually turning that into real accountability, I think, is going to be much more difficult. Really, holding somebody like Fauci accountable, holding the many, many public health authorities who gave and continued to give unscientific advice, accountable. It's just, I don't underestimate the power of the Borg here to protect its own, unfortunately.
Now, on President Trump, the witch hunts continue, and we had a Florida grand jury come to some findings recently, but let's hear from the foreperson of that grand jury that investigated the president. Let's listen to her.
My coolest moment was shaking Rudy Giuliani's hand. That was really cool for me. I made a point of stopping them and being like, wait, before we go back to this, can I shake your hand? Because an honor to meet the guy. It was really neat for me.
Wow. I would imagine President Trump's lawyers would be very interested in the media interviews that particular young lady gave. But for us, particularly here in Australia, it's astonishing to have the foreperson of a grand jury get on the media circuit and give interviews like that.
Right. Well, and I know then, of course, because we live in 2023 and the internet exists, very quickly people found all this stuff on her Instagram about her background in witchcraft and all these other things. So it was even kind of worse than it looked. But yeah, I mean, obviously just totally inappropriate. And it's weird because I think, you know, any legal things that ultimately happen with President Trump, I tend to think will just rebound to help him. And in fact, if I thought the Democrats were smart enough, which I don't, I would say that they were playing a bunch of three-dimensional chess. They probably fear running against DeSantis a little more than they do Trump right now, and they're trying to boost Trump by going after him in these really stupid legal ways. However, I just think it's really that the Democrats just can't help themselves. They're not kind of playing three-dimensional chess here. They have this atavistic need to go after Trump in the most juvenile ways, and that's what you're seeing.
Well, absolutely. I think that there's segments of them who are not going to be happy until Trump's in jail. This is the fever dream that sustains them. And you're so right. Every time Trump is the subject of these sort of attacks, his popularity increases. And we saw that after the raid at Mar-a-Lago. There was a massive boost for his chances of being the nominee again. Now, I want to ask you about some developments in Tennessee and Kansas. Kansas has become the first state to pass a bill that defines woman as someone who is biologically born female, something that many people will see as logical, factual, and it's a move that means women's only spaces, women's sport will be protected. Is this something that other states are likely to follow?
Well, I hope so. I mean, Kansas is certainly one of our more conservative states, but it's not sort of off the spectrum. And I think you'll see some of these things because right now, really, the battlefield is being fought on transing kids. And while that is particularly egregious, what I have, consistently communicated to my allies in this debate, and I'm certainly not the only one, is that it is a mistake. While kids are obviously the worst victims here, it is a mistake if we say, oh, well, what's happening with kids is horrible, but we just say kids, 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 and adults get to do whatever they want. And, as I tweeted out just a little bit ago, actually, people can obviously dress how they want. They can, ask to be addressed how they want. But when it comes to like men and women's spaces or anything else of that mind, should not be legally required to indulge in their fantasy. And I think it's important that we attack particularly this medicalized transition head on. And when some of our opponents say, oh, you're going after, it's not just kids, everybody, I'm like, yeah. And it's not because I want to punish them or that, you read all these things, oh, we want to see them dead. No, of course not. I mean, I don't. I want them to live full and meaningful lives, accepting who they are, not mutilating themselves with the help of the medical industrial complex.
Well, Tennessee has responded to the concerns of parents, and they've got a bill that's banned sex change procedures on minors. That's passed the state house in Tennessee. It'll make it illegal to give children cross-sex hormones, puberty blockers, and perform these surgeries that we have seen performed even on teenagers who are under 18, double mastectomies, just irreversible surgeries that can have long-term devastating consequences. Again, do you see that as a win for the conservative activists? Because this is one area where you've seen conservatives be really mobilised and almost behave like the left in the way that they are pursuing this activism, because I guess you could say conservatives too often, they're too busy working and raising families to worry about activism. But
Sure.
by not engaging in that sort of activism, they've allowed the left to pretty much march through all the institutions.
Well, I think that's right, and it's funny you mentioned families. I mean, I think one of the reasons this issue is so personal for me is I have 5 kids at home, and they're all of the age now where they could, in theory, be subjected to this stuff. And in fact, they are subjected to this. And I live in a pretty conservative area of the country, and of course, we do a lot of counter programming at home. But you see how these social contagions spread. In Tennessee, folks like Matt Walsh, who was kind of named Transphobe of the Year, I think, by one of the big LGBT organizations here. I think he was really the person who spearheaded that Tennessee law and should get a lot of credit for it. But I think that this is something that hits parents right where they live. And it's not just conservative parents. I mean, I went to a conference in DC with a number of people working on this, and the number of people I met who were, I was a liberal mom from San Francisco, and then this happened to my kid, and now they've turned into raging activists, appropriately so, on these issues. I mean, there's certainly a lot of folks who are religious and conservative like me, but there's also just a lot of kind of standard angry, appropriately angry parents.
Well, that's certainly the experience here in Australia as well. In fact, I would say the biggest fighters against this ideology are leftist feminists in this country. The conservatives here are a little bit too gutless to really fight this in any meaningful way in this country anyway. But you can see in America, you're having great success pushing back. Jeremy Kyle, thank you so much for joining me today.